USC looks to remain undefeated on the season as they host the 4-1 Washington State Cougars. The upset-minded Cougars look to dynamic quarterback Cameron Ward to lead the charge for this high-flying Cougs offense. Will USC be caught peeking ahead to next week's showdown in Salt Lake City, or will they quiet all talk of this being a trap game? We'll talk about all of that and more on this week's Trojan Game Preview. Hey guys, welcome into this week's game preview. This is a huge game for USC and for the Pac-12 as a whole. As a Trojan fan, you couldn't have asked for a better start than going 5-0, but this game is absolutely going to be a real challenge for the Trojans. In fact, earlier this week, Lincoln Riley discussed just how good this Washington State team is.
It's an important game. I mean, in any way you slice it, it's a really good football team coming in. I think it's the best football team that we've played up to this point, and they, I would say, equally good on both sides of the ball.
And after watching some of the Washington State tape, I think I have to agree. This is a very well-coached, very explosive and athletic team. USC has to lock in and absolutely cannot be looking ahead to the Utah game, because if USC is caught looking ahead, they're going to catch an L. Alright guys, so let's dive into this game preview, and as always, let's meet the coach of the Washington State Cougars. The Wazoo head coach is 39-year-old Jake Dickert. He's in his first full year as the head coach. He became the interim last year after Nick Rolovich was fired, and obviously he did a good enough job where they removed the interim title, and it's his job now. He's a defensive-minded head coach with a completely defensive background, which of course is a total change from the Mike Leach era. He runs a really fast and aggressive 4-2-5 defense that's a ton of fun to watch. Now, they are still running the air raid up at Washington State. It's a little different than when Mike Leach was there, and they're not going to throw it 65 times. They do run the ball a little bit, and they even have a few tight ends that they throw to sometimes. And also, an interesting fact about the offense is that the offensive coordinator, Eric Morris, he was previously the head coach at Incarnate Word. And that's right, that's the same Incarnate Word where Cameron Ward came from. It's very cool that Cameron Ward got to transfer up to an FBS school, and his head coach got to follow him. Another cool connection with Eric Morris is that Lincoln Riley was actually a grad assistant at Texas Tech when Morris was a player there. And of course, Alex Grinch used to be the defensive coordinator at Washington State. There's just a bunch of connections up and down these coaching staffs, which is really cool to see. Alright, so let's meet this Cougar offense. Now, like I said earlier, this is an air raid offense like we're used to seeing at Wazoo. And after watching a bunch of their tape, there's one main takeaway that I came away with. And it's that this offense completely runs through starting quarterback Cameron Ward. They live or die based on how he's playing. So let's talk more about Cameron Ward. Like I mentioned earlier, last season he was at Incarnate Word absolutely torching FCS defenses. There was a lot of hype around him this offseason when he announced his transfer to Washington State, and rightfully so. He is a very special athlete. He already has an NFL tool set. He comes with a cannon for an arm, an ability to throw sidearm or off platform. He can extend plays, he can get out of sacks, and he can run if he needs to. He's just an absolute pure playmaker. When you watch his tape, the ball explodes out of his hand. He actually reminds me a ton of Jackson Dart from last year while at USC, with both the positives and the negatives of Dart's game. Now let's talk about some of those weaknesses or some of those more negative things. He makes about 3 to 4 terrible decisions a game, just really awful choices with the ball. I mean, like, defenders are directly in his line of sight and he throws it right to them. In the 4 games that Washington State has played against FBS teams, he's thrown 7 picks. And as we know with USC, the defense is extremely opportunistic and will create turnovers, primarily interceptions. So when the USC defenders get their hands on the ball, they absolutely have to make a play on it. Now, this is absolutely a pass-first offense, but they do have a really nice option out of the backfield with junior running back Nakia Watson. He is just as talented a runner as he is a receiver. He had 8 receptions in the Oregon game alone. They'll throw him screens, swings, and they'll even line him up outside at receiver and let him run some routes. He is very, very talented in the receiving game. I'd have to imagine that they'll do their best to get him matched up on Shane Lee, which is obviously a huge advantage for Washington State. Now, talking about the Wazoo wideouts, this is a really, really talented group, and the more I watch them, the more I like them. Donovan Ollie leads the group with 27 catches for nearly 300 yards and 2 scores. Dejon Stribling leads the team with 4 touchdowns. He's a phenomenal route runner with great hands as well. Multiple times this year, they've thrown him screens down in the red zone, and he has phenomenal run after the catch ability. So the USC defense will definitely have to be careful of that. Now, this offense does not throw to the tight ends much. That room only has 5 receptions on the year. But when Mike Leach was the coach, they didn't even have tight ends on the roster, so I'm sure that this is an improvement for Washington State fans. Now, moving to the Washington State offensive line, that unit is led by a familiar face as well, and former USC offensive line coach Clay McGuire. Now, we all saw how much the USC offensive line improved with Clay at the helm, and this Washington State offensive line has definitely improved from last year. Now, while they have improved, they definitely are not elite. They've already given up 15 sacks, which is good for 14th most in the entire country. To be fair to them, a lot of that has to do with Cameron Ward hanging onto the ball for way too long. This seems like it has the potential to be a very big Solomon Byrd game, and he needs to step up and take over this game. That will really allow the rest of the defense to take advantage of Ward's mistakes. Now, some interesting numbers for this Washington State offense. They have the 27th passing offense in the country. They've had the 7th most turnovers with 12. They rank 122nd in rushing, so like I said earlier, not much of a running threat. They rank 86th in total offense, which I thought was going to be higher, to be honest. They also have the 11th ranked red zone offense, and USC has the 3rd ranked red zone defense, so spoiler alert, that's going to be one of my keys to the game. Alright, now let's transition over and meet this Washington State defense. This Wazoo defense has been very good so far. They fly around and swarm to the ball. They've forced 5 interceptions on the year so far, but only 2 of them coming from defensive backs, which is very interesting. Now, at the tail end of the Oregon game, this defense got absolutely shredded, and the fact that that win against Wisconsin looked a lot more impressive at the time, but that win is just aging worse and worse as each week passes. Sort of has me questioning how legit this defense really is. We'll obviously learn a lot about them this week as they face USC's offense. But now moving into the personnel of this 4-2-5 Wazoo defense, this is by far the fastest and quickest defensive line that USC has faced so far. They really get off their blocks and pursue the ball very, very well. I was very impressed by defensive end Brennan Jackson. He is very explosive and very strong as well. He's a multiple-time winner of the Pac-12 Defensive Lineman of the Week award. He has 2 sacks on the year, but pressures are where he earns his keep. This defense is actually number 5 in the country in total pressures, so the USC offensive line is really going to have to bring their A game for this one. Now, the player on their defense who stood out the most to me is senior linebacker Deion Henley. This guy is an absolute playmaker. He comes into this game leading their defense with 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and interception. He also leads the team in tackles with 44. In the offseason, when he transferred from Nevada, USC was one of his finalists, and I really wanted him. He's a great player, and I'm glad he's having so much success. Now, I would definitely say that the secondary is the weakness of the Cougs defense, although by no means are they bad. I actually really like their top 2 corners in Chow Smith-Wade and Armani Marsh. They are 5'10 and 5'11 respectively, so this could definitely be a game where Kyle Ford or CJ Williams are used down in the red zone. Sam Lockett is a really intriguing player as well. He's a 6'1 junior corner who has 3 passes defense and 23 tackles. There's a lot of really intriguing and versatile players in this Cougs secondary. Although overall, I think that the USC wide receivers completely outclassed the Washington State DBs, it'll still be an interesting matchup to watch. Overall, the Washington State defense tackles well, and they play at 100 miles per hour all the time. USC has to match their effort in this game. The offensive line has to hold up to give Caleb Williams time. The Washington State DBs really struggle to stay with wideouts when a play lasts longer than 3 to 4 seconds, so you got to give Caleb time to find the wide open guys downfield. Now for some interesting numbers for the Washington State defense. They rank 69th in total defense, and they're 36th in third down defense, which is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Now it's time for my keys to the game, and as always, we'll start with the offense. My number 1 key is dominate first down. If you can frequently get into 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1 situations, that opens up the entire playbook and will allow Caleb Williams to take shots downfield. And explosive plays are the name of the game against teams like Washington State, so USC has to take advantage of when they have those opportunities and hit them. Now the first key leads right into the second, because the second one is test their DBs downfield. After watching their tape, I don't think that the Washington State defensive backs can stay with these receivers downfield, so I'd look for Lincoln Riley and this USC offense to test them early and often. And the third offensive key is simply first 3 possessions. In all but 1 game this year, the USC offense has successfully scored on their first 3 possessions, that 1 game being the Oregon State game, of course. If you can score in your first 3, 4, or 5 possessions, that does wonders for your entire team. That'll put Washington State into panic comeback mode very early on, and it'll allow your defensive line to just tee off on the quarterback. Now moving over to the defense, the number 1 key is take away the QB run. This one's pretty simple. Against a quarterback who's so prone to horrible mistakes when throwing from the pocket, force him to stay in there, don't let him extend plays. Make them one-dimensional and the turnovers will come. Now the second key for the defense is bend, don't break. We know that this USC defense is going to give up some yards, but as long as they keep up the great red zone defense that they've been showing, USC will absolutely win this game. And the last defensive key is capitalize on Ward's mistakes. He's going to throw you 3 to 4 balls, you have to catch them and you have to turn those turnovers into points. Alright guys, so those were my keys to the game. Now just for some final thoughts. I know I say this every week, but this is a huge game for USC. The schedule is just getting harder and harder. Some advice to any USC fans overlooking this Washington State team: don't. This Washington State team is absolutely a top 25 team. The fact that they aren't ranked is an absolute joke. USC needs to treat Wazoo like a ranked team, because on the field they absolutely are. My score prediction for this game is USC 34, Washington State 31. I think there's going to be a lot of big plays, huge momentum swings, but at the end of the day, the experience of Lincoln Riley and the talent of the Trojan offense will prevail. Make sure you let me know your score predictions down in the comments. But anyways guys, that'll do it for this week's game preview. Thank you all so much for listening and for all the support. I appreciate all of you so much. We hit 100 subs on the channel, which is a huge accomplishment. Thank you all again. And I'll see you guys Monday. Fight on.